join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
It's a start, and it's a good start. Those were the words of a delighted Sean Dych'e following the superb victory over FC Porto in the Europa League last night. Forest rolled the Dych'e, and in his first match came up with a 2 and a 0 in favour of the Reds. Setting his stall out in the pre-match press conference, Dych'e made it clear that his and his coaching team's history with the club, whilst important to them and everyone else, it is the here and now that matters above everything, and moving the team forward and the club as well is everyone's priority. And the talk of style of play, what's in vogue, and team identity was underpinned on the pitch when we saw immediately a return to what had made Forest so hard to beat under Nuno. Grit, determination, old school defending, and a drive to work for each other. In the next hour, we'll talk about Sean Dyche's first win as Forest head coach, and also squeeze in a look ahead to the trip to Bournemouth on Sunday. This is Talking Reds, and I'm your host, Greg Oram, along with my partner in crime, Richard Spray. On the panel, we welcome the Statman Danscape and Tricky Tree Travels, Alan Merryweather. However, the big question for everyone surely will be, what's in your wardrobe? Skinny jeans or flared jeans?
Who let the dogs out?
Dych'e.
Who let the dogs out?
Skinny jeans, flared jeans, skinny jeans, flared jeans.
Who let the dogs out?
Dych'e.
Who let the dogs out?
It's on fourth, but anyway, don't like to mention it. The bit that I like is when you win. But notice I want Nottingham Forest, I want this match to win in football, which is way beyond my time. You know, I want the club to win. You know, I'm pretty much flatlined through success and failure. Everyone will know that. Don't get too high with the highs, too low with the lows. I'm at both.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Skinny jeans, flared jeans, skinny jeans, flared jeans.
Who let the dogs out?
Dych'e.
Who let the dogs out?
It's a huge night on the banks of the River Trent. The Forest captain deliver. Yes, he can! Nottingham Forest lead. Morgan Gibbs White scores his first goal. Jesus against Diogo Costa. And he scores. He scores at the City Ground for the very first time. And Nottingham Forest lead Porto by 2 goals.
Young ginger, well done.
Here we go. Press conference through to first match. Kind of sums it all up. It's just a feel-good factor is back, and all of a sudden, we are off and running. The season is underway, Richard Spray. How are you feeling?
Oh, goodness gracious. How could you be feeling anything but elated? I mean, it's just finally the rot stops. We, looked like ourselves again, at least for that match. And I do appreciate, though, that he's very measured and he's very controlled. He's not trying to get everybody too excited, as Dan has even said, too, which he's been great about tempering things a little bit and saying, hey, and Sean Dyche said the same thing. It's the feel-good factor will be there, but it's not going to last forever. So we've got to reset, not only in terms of just how we're feeling about things in general, but just how we play on the pitch. And so hopefully it will continue into this weekend, as we'll talk about, but you can't be anything but joyful after what we saw. And it was great to get the crowd, and all those that were there, the opportunity to see what they wanted to see against Midtjylland, right? They wanted to see that kind of performance level, and to get it almost from beginning to end and consistent level of play from beginning to end was excellent, because we just haven't had that in a while either. So brilliant stuff.
Excellent. Okay. We'll say hello to the boys as we go around. Let's crack on with things. I'll come to you first, Danscape. Good morning, Dan. I know you were at the game last night. Saw nice pictures of you with some of our crew in the Trent Nav beforehand. So we got the team news, and we got the shape that we've been kind of trying to predict a little bit. We were kind of almost in the ballpark of the team. It was probably his strongest team, I reckon, he could have picked. What did you make of it, and just give us your general views on the match?
Yeah, it was a good night. Good to see a few people in the nav beforehand. Nice sort of frigid, cold evening, getting back into the proper football season. But luckily, the football wasn't frigid in the same way. It was fairly exciting throughout, and I think the lineup was I guess it was what you expect from Dyche, because he's talked about trying to replicate what we did last season. And so it's kind of as close as you go back to that team, obviously adding in Ndoye for Elanga and then Douglas Luiz going in there, who did really well. So I think it was kind of what I guess we'd probably all hoped he'd do, which is just go back to something that looks familiar. The players will know it. And I think that was the bit that jumped out for me from the performances. It just looked like the players were sort of given the task of doing what they've already done. Like, just go and do what you know how to do. Don't try anything else. Just let's get compact, let's get solid, and let's try and hit them on the break when we can. And it seemed like the clean sheet was everything, really. That was what they were fighting for. You could see how keen they were on the tackles and stuff, and just knocking the ball out for throws every now and then. And Gibbs White was like saying, "Yes, come on, we've done it," and all that. And that just seemed to be everything, regardless of the final score. It was like, let's just prove to ourselves we can do that again. And all unfolded and happy days.
So quickly want to say to everyone watching, welcome along. Thank you for joining us on the live. If you are listening later, thank you for tuning in via a podcast such as Apple and Spotify. You can listen on that as well, and a few other places now. So thank you very much for joining us and listening in. Please do go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. It is really helpful to us to try and boost our numbers. We want to share the love of Nottingham Forest as much as we can. We're on all social media channels. Please hit like and subscribe. Alan, great to have you back with us. I know we were talking off air. You definitely celebrated that win last night. How are you feeling about it? And are you happy when Dan was talking about Dyche being quite unashamed about pointing out the good things under Nuno and that shape and that style of play? And he's quite happy to say, look, they're the kind of things that I'm going to draw on. Are you happy to hear that? And what do you make of it all?
Well, I don't know about you guys, but finally I can breathe. If you take it from Morgan Gibbs White. The thing is with Dyche, he might not be the right manager, but he's right now. And this is what we've needed. You've seen the atmosphere in the crowd. Obviously, as you know, I go to every game. And the crowd's been the crowd has, some of it's their fault as well. But I think the crowd were brilliant last night. Great banter. The atmosphere was there. There was very much a feel-good factor. But yeah, I'm pleased with the way we played, pleased with the way we set up. I think this week has been a PR dream.
Yeah. I mean, Alan, I stick with you. Stone and Wone, how much does that matter? I mean, we know that they've been his backroom staff, and he talks about Billy Mercer as well and Tony Loughlin, who have also got a little bit of a Forest history. So as a group of like 4 or 5 of them, or whatever it is, how important to you is that? And do you think that connectivity back to the fan base, is really going to underpin a successful season now?
I'll be perfectly honest. If he had no connection, but he won his games, I'd be happy. The connection to me, we had that with Pearce, we had that with O'Neill and Keane. Didn't really work for them. Hopefully it does for Dyche. Just want him to win. I just want any manager to win. I wanted Dyche to win. So really, to me personally, it's not essential, but he's saying all the right things. The badge is bigger than the club and bigger than, the badge is bigger than him and Stoney and Woney. It's nice to have that connection. Personally, all I want to see it connect to is 3 points every week.
I think after the Ange debacle, which it really was, for me personally, I think that connection is really important because I think the feel-good factor really helps the crowd. And you touched on the crowd a moment ago, Alan, about maybe they're being at fault in places and not playing their part. But I think when you give them that kind of set of men that have got different histories with the club, but certainly Stone and Wone, that feel-good, that energy, that buzz, I think that does help the crowd buy in a little bit more. Yes, I know that it's not the be-all and end-all, and I know that results matter, and I know that it can fade quite quickly when results might go the way you don't want to go. But they get it.
They get the culture. They get the history. Yeah. They've been part of that culture and history. And now, because I think the one thing that I think modern football, we lose that. You know, we lose the. I mean, it was interesting to see who was on the bench last night. The two, what was it, 2-3 young lads, and Yates. So that's great to see. But I just really want to. It's the 3 points for me. And I love Stoney. I love Stoney.
He's got no hair like you. That's why.
I love him.
None of them got any hair at the moment. I just think, just to finish off the connectivity thing, the results are important, but I think the crowd definitely get a boost from that, and it maybe transmits even a 1% extra transmission onto the pitch. Richard Spray, I think, is a good thing. But coming to you now, Richard, on that team news and on that shape last night. And, just generally, what did you think of that performance? It felt to me like we had two halves of football rather than one half of football.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it was just a feeling of, and I think Dan touched on this, and I was saying it too, is that it looked like they knew what they were designed to do. There was a structure, there was a plan, there was a purpose to things. There wasn't wasteful possession. It felt very deliberate, very intentional and they all kind of felt like they were in sync because they better understood kind of what their roles were and things of that nature. So I mean, and that's clearly going to make a difference. Plus the fact that, look, it's not exclusively Ange's fault. I mean, I think the way that he approached it as things got a little bit more clearly more tenuous and so forth. I think Matt Ford said like he came in already defensive with every question that was being asked. I think the fact that he knew that he came in with an overdraft, right, just from the hangover of Tottenham, and so you've got the fans kind of already recognizing that as soon as things started to go bad, they turn, and so that connection is lost, and then he doesn't try to win that connection back. But it was all there last night for all of us to see. But I do feel like, as we've said, the way that Dyche was going to set things up was going to be that way. It was going to be more akin to what we were familiar with previously. He's openly said that. Dan referenced that. And I think by virtue of that it hasn't been so far out of the minds of the players as to what that looks like and what the expectations are in that kind of framework. That makes it easier for them to be able to execute, I think. And so they looked more cohesive last night, right? They just, and what I liked about it was that in matches last season, especially in that first half of the season, things got a little dicey at the end. But at the first half, when you go into matches as a fan, some of the litmus tests that I went in with is, how nervous am I about this, right? And then I wasn't. I didn't feel like we're out of control. I didn't feel like, even when we thought they had scored, I still felt, well, that's unfortunate, clearly. But I didn't feel like we couldn't get something back. I thought we, even though we didn't dominate the possession stat, we showed enough of that. And we showed enough movement off the ball and enough control of space and things of that nature. We just didn't feel as nervous like this is going to go awry. This is going to be another Michelin or another West Ham scenario. You know what I mean? It never felt that way. And that's fantastic, I think. Will that continue against Bournemouth? I mean, we'll talk about that and we'll see what happens. But I think for now, we can rely on the fact that hopefully that's what we're going to get at least week in and week out. And a physicality and an effort level, too, that I think was different, a different energy from the boys.
Okay. Want to dip into the comments. Mark Way NFFC agrees that it was nice to see two decent halves of football put together. Clean sheet under the belt. That's very important. Still but still too much nice approach play without an effort on goal at the end of it. Well, that's going to be worked on, I'm sure of that. Pat Brett says, I thought Eminem, that's Moreno and Milenkovic, were back to their best, which is good news. I agree heartily with that. And Mark has dipped in to his pocket with a £2 donation again. Thank you, buddy. And he says that's for the pre-Man U refreshment kitty. We really appreciate that. Indeed, Richard is flying tomorrow to join us in the UK and will be at Man United as well. Dave Red Dog said, I like the effort when they lost the ball. They fought to get it back. Never really saw it to that extent under Ange. It was pleasant. Also, Steve in the comments says, good morning from Clearwater, Florida. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, Brucey from Texas says things got a little bit Dych'e in the comments as well. They certainly did. He's made the impression. He's made the impact. We had almost like 6 weeks of a nightmare scenario where you kind of fall asleep, and it kind of like almost like it to like sort of like Bobby Ewing moment in Dallas. It's like, did that really happen? It's like, let's just erase that season, and then I pull back the curtain and there's Sean Dych'e washing his back in your shower saying, "Hi boys, here I am." So off we go again. So it feels like our season is now underway. I mean, I don't want to get too carried away, but that's me. That's my DNA. You know me, guys. I do get carried away. I'm very excitable because it was so important for us to get some kind of performance and result, and we got that in abundance. I would have been happy for a point, Danscape, beforehand, but we got the win. And our Europa League campaign, 1-1, lost 1, drawn 1. We're in 17th place in the playoff places with the more favourable ties to come, some might say. So, we really can look at that competition that we played in last night and say, look, all is not lost there. Focus will turn, and we'll talk about Bournemouth in the second half of this episode. We'll talk about Bournemouth in the Premier League shortly, but just sticking with last night then. So let's get into a few more details. Talk to us about the first penalty, Dan. I mean, Bednarek was someone I thought would feature in this game because he was a bit of a thorn on our side, playing for Southampton, got a goal last season. He was at fault for the handball. Any doubts in your mind?
Well, in the ground, yeah, because it looked like it was Igor Jesus who'd handballed it from where I was sat, and that's how it looked. But it does sort of hit his arm. But when you see it on TV, I've only kind of watched it once, but you can see it does hit Bednarek's arm first, and then it goes into Jesus's arm. Sorry, I've got a cat on my keyboard. I'm still here.
Podcast cat. We love the podcast cat.
Yeah, he's still here. He's a Sean Dych'e fan. So at the time you were like, that's a soft one. You sort of think, God, how fine of the margins are football, right? Because, Ange would say, look, I got nothing go my way at all while I was there. And then all of a sudden, within like 15 minutes of Dyche ball, you get in a soft penalty and you're 1-0 up and you're like, you could just imagine Ange sat there smashing up his TV. Something like that. I'm just going to remove the cat. You're just thinking, look, everything's going our way, and then it's can we hold on? And up till that point, I thought it was a quiet game. There was one move that Porto did after about 2 minutes where we tried to press them on their left back, and they strung together 4 or 5 passes that were just like automatic passes. They knew exactly where to run and go, and you were thinking, okay, they're up for this, and this could be a troublesome game. So it was good to get in the lead and make them have to chase it, so that we weren't having to kind of put pressure on them and maybe play into their way as well. But yeah, just obviously great. The main bit for that was that it was Gibbs White who scored it as well, under pressure, with a bit of doubt around him and all that. That was the main thing that you were like, again, if that was under Ange, there's a good chance he misses that penalty, because that's just the way everything was going. So you just like, this is it. This is kind of turned it round for not just the manager, but Gibbs White as well, because when he turns up, we turn up. So hopefully that's the start of his form kicking in.
I was a bit nervous when Morgan stepped up, Alan, for the penalty, because he just makes me feel like he's going to try something like a stuttering run or something. But in fairness, he hasn't missed one for Forest, actually. In all the penalties he's taken, he hasn't missed one. And he put that away really nicely. So we were 1-0 up and off we went. We got a lot to get through, so we're not going to go into minute detail. So I'm going to whiz us forward now to their goal that was ruled out, Alan, which I think, Richard, you said you weren't so worried when they scored. I felt a bit differently, if I'm honest with you. When they scored the goal, immediately I thought, okay, what is this going to do to them now? It was a set piece goal again, and as much as I thought overall we handled set pieces really well, Alan, to concede from a set piece, I was worried it would affect him, but it was ruled out. And so what kind of relief were you feeling? And did you have any worries that a goal might just kind of like send it the other way?
Do you know? No, do you know? For once, I didn't. What shocked me that up on the screen, he came up initially as a foul, and then it moved to offside. So I've not seen any replay of the of any of the goals or any of the incidents. But do you know? Was it? Oh, right, okay. So the two things I'll say is, I thought the referee was brilliant. The scenes in the away end when they scored was brilliant. And, you know, I just felt confident because just before our first goal, Hudson-Odoi cut inside, curled one in, went out for a corner. And I just felt as if he was on the front foot. I had no issues with them scoring whatsoever, especially, you know, just so early into the second half. And normally, under Ange, would have just crumbled.
Yeah, I mean, it was ruled out, Richard. There was no goal for them. And I was really impressed with actually the response, because it was almost like Porto had a good period of play, and they got that offside goal from that moment. And that, I thought, might galvanise them. Okay, look, we've scored here. We can hurt them. We just got to make sure we're not offside. But actually, it was Forest, I felt, that developed the second half as the better team, had more possession. And as much as Dych'e is this so-called defensive-minded manager, we were still offering stuff on the attack. And I think Mark said it earlier in the comments about not really being able to kind of like finish things off. And I think that still needs to be worked on. But there was still efforts coming forward. I mean, I want to chip in as well and put it into your mind. Dan N'Doye, Hudson-Odoi, for me, I thought were fantastic last night. The work rate from both of them, and Dan N'Doye in particular in the second half. Some of the stuff he was doing in a defensive kind of mind, he was putting tackles in, and he was getting close. He was getting tight. He was pressing. You know, he runs with the ball really, really well. You know, really put an effort in. And I know this is music to Danscape's ears. He's like almost, he needs a box of tissues for this one. But Dan N'Doye I thought was great. Richard Hudson-Odoi was great. The offside goal didn't happen, and then we get the second penalty. Take us through the second penalty. Was it clear to you? I mean, was it a mystery that it was not given in the first place?
At first, no, because I didn't in real time. It was so far away, you couldn't really get all the mechanics of what happened, right? But you could see that he went down, and it maybe on first pass, I was like, oh, he's getting a foul for that. He's getting a yellow card. Yeah. But then I was just like, but then when you started to look at it closely, I think the thing that undid the player on Porto was the fact that he kicked his leg out. I don't think he got a ton of contact. I think it was enough probably just to make it clear that, so there could have been some embellishment from Savona, a little bit of embellishment, but I think it was the fact that he kicked his leg out, made contact, so it looked like an intent to try to take him out, even though I don't think the force of it was really that much to take him out. Yeah, for sure. So, I was a bit shocked that he gave him a yellow card initially, because it didn't look like a clear and obvious dive to me, but I'm certainly grateful that finally VAR went our way in abundance last night, between the goal that was disallowed from them and getting up 2 penalties. It's just ironic that the previous manager of Everton, who was there when all of that went down with Everton, is the guy who's here now, and then we get the opposite treatment. So maybe Dych'e is about getting good VAR treatment. I don't know, but yeah, exactly.
VAR did its job. I mean, ultimately,
100%. That was well executed VAR. Yeah, for sure.
Decisions.
Yeah, that's the way it should look. Yeah. So I was definitely feeling the same way that Dan said. I mean, it just felt like stars were aligning to a degree, finally getting some things going our way. But I think the way that we were tenacious in and around the box and getting the ball back. I mean, I was trying to remember, was it Luis who won the ball back? And then it kind of like almost backheeled it into Savona. I just like the way that the mentality of closing players down and keeping space is really restricted. I mean, that to me was something that was a calling card for Nuno when we were really accelerating our performance level last season, as we were just really hard, not only in terms of breakdown in that final third, but just not giving guys a ton of space. When you saw us give that up, games against Newcastle, games against Arsenal, games against Man City, you saw that kind of frailty. That's when we lost matches and we looked dominated, right? But when we were doing this, it feels more natural to who we have on the pitch. Certainly the finishing's got to continue to improve. We saw them working on that in the training ground, didn't we? So on the video from the club. So hopefully that all kind of works itself out. But I thought everybody put in basically a 7 out of 10 or better performance, and that's ultimately what we know is going to get us wins, because the way we play defensively, and this is what Dyche said too, if you have that foundation, then you can build off of that. And I think you saw some evidence of that last night. Hope it continues. Obviously, we don't want to get too excited too quickly, but definitely felt like the penalty was the right choice.
Pat Brett says we had a proper team shape and different parts of the team were properly connected up throughout the game. It was pleasing to see. And Pat, you won't mind me reminding everyone that you were not particularly in favour of Dyche being the manager on our last pod. I'm sure you probably still feel the same, but as most Forest fans, just want to see the team win. Mark is asking in the comments. Mark Cantrell says, "Was that yellow card rescinded?" Yes, it definitely was. I saw that happen. So the yellow card being taken away. Danscape, you heard me wax lyrical a moment about Dan Doyle, so feel free to chip in on him. But I want to ask you your view on Douglas Luiz last night. Played 82 minutes, I think it was, which was great to see. What's your view on him, and how important is he for what Dyche wants this Forest team to do and how to set up?
He was great. He was what, I suppose he was hyped up to be, kind of controlled the game. He was very assured in possession, which is something we've not always had in the middle of the park. But not in a a backwards way. He didn't always want to play the ball backwards, which sometimes you can get midfielders that look good on the ball, but they always go sideways and backwards. He was still looking to take a man on and nick past him and try and open up the space as well, which was good. I think it's the kind of game that suited him, being like a European opposition whereby you're not necessarily coming up against a massive marauding sort of midfielder all the time. It's more of a technical game, which I think suits him. But he did really well, and like Richard touched on, the little interception he did for the goal or the penalty was great. And he did a couple of other interceptions like that, not too far before it, where he just read the pass, stepped across and took it. And I think that's what really helps you obviously control a game, isn't it? You don't have to always be physical if you can just read ahead and do that. So I thought that was great. It was interesting to see him play like 80 odd minutes. Be interesting to see whether he plays on Sunday. I'm probably predicting he might not. He might get a rest for that one and then come back again, because we have got options in terms of bodies. I'm sure Dyche will fancy that others can step in and do it. But no, I think he was really good. And I think I looked at the stats. He's got 4 goal contributing actions in Europe already this season. So he's joined top of that list because he was involved in the corner at Betis and setting up that penalty chance. And he played the pass or he's involved in the pass for the first penalty as well. So he's up there for actually influencing the game, which is good.
Fantastic. Alan, Zinchenko, are you still with us, Alan? Because you've frozen. I know you're still there. You hadn't frozen. You were doing a very good impression of a statue. I thought your camera would frozen. You literally didn't move, but you're back. Zinchenko is a player that is kind of dividing an opinion a little bit. I think people know that there's a good player in there, but it's how to get the best out of him. But we saw him go off injured, and he is injury prone. I want to get your thoughts on young Savona that came on. You were at the game last night. From my point of view on the TV, I thought he played really well when he came on.
He was fantastic.
How did you see it? Yeah,
I thought he when we played Chelsea, I was very suspect of him. He was getting caught out of position a little bit too much, not pulling in when they was attacking. But I thought what was really good last night, you could see Milenkovic constantly shouting at him. And
really important.
Certainly the first week, the bits that we could, second half where we could see, Milenkovic was always telling him, pull in, move out, move on. He was brilliant. And I think it helps when you've got the 2 lads in the middle that are so vocal, or certainly last night, it was the first time I've noticed Milenkovic being so vocal. Savania, and he was given an option just behind Hudson-Odoi, which was fantastic. But I also think, just coming back on something that Dan was saying, you look at that middle of the midfield, what we've got in there at the moment. What do we start off with? Luiz, Ando and Morgan Gibbs-White. You've got Sangare, Yatesy, Dominguez, McAtee. You've got so many options in there. And my only fear is our squad could be a little bit too big. But then you look at what happens at your fullback, when Zinchenko went off, and then obviously we're missing Olarena. Yeah. But no, I thought it was a great game. I think him and Ndoye, my favourite game from both of them.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Round pegs in round holes. Sean Dyche has talked about that repeatedly. And it feels like he's, as much as we have got a lot of players, I get a sense that he knows how to use them and where to put them. And so Savonia last night playing his best game for us in a Dyche formation doesn't surprise me, because it feels like his profile of player, more of a sit-in defender, is going to suit Dyche's system. Make no mistake, though, Savonia will get forward as well. For a 6'4", 6'5" lad, he will get forward, but we're going to have more threat from our left back. Nico Williams, fantastic again. He just does not stop impressing me. Elliot Anderson, again, he wants the ball in tight spaces. What more can we say about him? But as a whole, I thought the team in general just looked like they'd got a bit of their identity back. They were buying into each other again. The crowd helped. Milenkovic, who I don't think's been bad this season, I felt like he was just back to the Milenkovic from last year. Murillo's been in and out with injury, but he looked back to being like himself. There were so many good things going on. And so when we talk about Bournemouth, we'll maybe kind of reflect on how that team might change. But before we do switch to that and close off last night's game, you touched on it earlier, Alan. I'll put it on the screen. Morgan Gibbs-White afterwards in an interview said, "I feel like I can finally breathe. It's been a difficult couple of months here. All the changes happened, the bad performances. To do it here at the City Ground on a European night is an incredible feeling. No one deserves it more than these fans. Those 3 points were for the fans for sticking by us." The gaffer came in and said, last season you had a real identity, a real structure to how you wanted to play. He wants to bring that in and build on top of that. I think you've seen that tonight. We were solid, hard to break down. When we went forward, we could have been a bit more clinical, but we take the 3 points and move on. So, saying the right things, but the thing that's of interest there, Richard Spray, is that bit at the beginning. I feel like I can finally breathe. Now, what did you think he meant by that?
Well, I'm sure as the focal point of the team, because he's the captain on the pitch, typically. He's the guy who's one of the highest paid players on the team. He clearly had a very controversial sort of series of events that ended up in him signing a much bigger deal. So the microscope has been on him already, and it's gotten even more the case since all of that has occurred. So I'm sure there's aspects of that he's referring to. Maybe he felt like his performance level was a little bit more of what he should be giving in the match. Because similar to Milenkovic, I don't think he's been terrible, bad. I mean, he wasn't good against West Ham, but I think it's just the impact hasn't been there of what we expect him to have. You know what I mean? And so, to get a goal as well has to give him a little bit of life, a little bit of breath back as well. So there's probably multiple facets to that. As my boss likes to say, it's multifactorial. So maybe that's the case with him in terms of what that means. But plus just in general, getting those 3 points, getting themselves in a better headspace overall as a club, and him setting the tone for that too, because he is the captain. I think that makes his job a little bit easier when the confidence level and the energy level and the belief is back in a little bit more abundance. So, yeah, but I thought he did a really good job. And I thought defensively as well. I think Dyche called it out like, we know he can play defensively. That was the interesting thing he said after in the TNT interview. And I was like, it was. I mean, he was getting back and he was winning balls back and getting things moving. And just to see that a little bit more as opposed to just the dispossession and the, iffy passes and even in short passes were not coming off in certain points. So I'm sure all of that about his game just feeling a little bit easier for him and not quite as overwhelming to be the guy who has to drive this new style of play forward when maybe that's just not something he's necessarily suited for or doesn't feel as comfortable in. So, yeah.
I mean, I thought he had one of his better games, definitely. Yeah. He was definitely getting involved. He was definitely, really leading the team. And, really, when he plays well, we play well. Danscape, just quickly on that comment, do you think he might have been having a bit of a dig at Ange at any point in that?
Seems like it. I mean, it's everything, isn't it? When things aren't going right and the manager's the guy that's the focal point, I guess everything feels wrong and players sort of probably talk to each other and everything just builds up as being the wrong atmosphere and stuff. And I'm not sure it can have been the whole time that Ange was there. Let's not forget after Betis, we had a similar example as last night where we were all feeling good and we played a really good half of football and we're like, yeah, we're going to kick on and Ange will sort it out. And it didn't. So we're early days with this guy. It just everything piled up under Ange and the pressure was on from the crowd, like we talked about. The crowd were waiting for things to go wrong almost at times, and that doesn't help either. So I think it's a bit of obviously the fact that I think what Ange didn't do is believe in the players that they could do what they did last season and adapt. He tried to sort of force them into doing something else, which I don't think they bought into. Whereas Dyche is going the other ways and he's saying, look, let's start with what you can do, and then we'll try and add to that when we hit a problem, and hopefully he can manage that and keep everybody happy within that squad.
Those that can see the screen will notice that behind me, my Morgan Gibbs-White picture is back. It hasn't been up for a while. I did have a big plant that was there. We've moved that, and so there was an empty space which I hadn't filled. I thought I just didn't feel ready to put the Gibbs-White picture back up again, but I kind of feel we've turned a big corner now. And last night he got his goal, and we got the fingers in his celebration. He came out afterwards and he was vocal. I'm not sure that he was definitely having a direct dig at Ange personally. I feel maybe he was talking about the pressure as a whole has been so intense on everyone that now we've kind of released that by scoring goals and winning a game of football. But listen, only he will know. But look, the Gibbs White picture is back and it will remain. It will be our new lucky charm. Now he's back on the boil. Okay, I'm conscious that Alan's got to go in about 5 minutes. So we're going to close off talking about Porto for the moment. We might revert back to it and we'll switch our focus after this short break when we come back and talk about the trip to Bournemouth.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
I think you know about the cheese by now and the discount available. Quote Talking Reds for 10% off and get yourself involved with some yummy, scrummy cheese from Stu Freestone, Forest fan, the Cheese Trader in York. Alan, I'm going to come to you first on Bournemouth then because you're going to have to leave shortly. Bournemouth flying high in the, I was about to say in the first division then, showing my age, blimey, flying high in the Premier League. Semenyo on fire, their manager, hot property. What are you hoping for? Following the win last night, what are you really hoping for we see on Sunday? I know you're not going to make this one, which is a rarity for you, but I'm sure you'll be grabbing it on TV. What are you hoping to see? What's going to be a good outcome in your eyes for Sunday?
Win at home, lose away. Win at home, draw away. Do you know what? I hate Bournemouth with every part of my body. Every part. You're just looking at. Oh my God, it's madness. I mean, you look at some of the players, that little 12,000-seater stadium. I think they're brilliant for what they do, but I hate them. Iriola, great manager. Would have liked to have seen him being considered for us, but very happy with Dyche. They're phenomenal, and they score some goals as well. And you look at some of the players who've got Semenyo, Kluivert, Evan Nilsson, Sinisterra. I think they're a great team for the Premier League. I hate being nice about them because we never get anything against Bournemouth. But no, do you know, to be honest, I think Dyche will have another couple of days with the players. He'll show them up a little bit at the back. You look, what was their last game? Was it 3-0?
3-0.
They've had a 2-0. So they're leaking goals. You know, I know they lost most of the back line in the summer, but they're leaking goals, and I think that's what we've got to do. You know, go back to the old Kevin Keegan analogy. You know, you can let in 3 as long as you score 4.
Well, that was really Ange's philosophy, wasn't it, to a certain degree? And that I don't think suited us at all. But if Bournemouth are scoring goals and leaking goals, that might suit us, Alan, in terms of, you know, hitting them on the break. I mean, just again, conscious you've got about a minute left with us. Right. Any thoughts on team before you go and who you'd like to see feature? Do you think Douglas Luiz will play, or maybe?
I don't think he'll play. I think we'll see Dominguez or Yates drop in there. I think Yates is very much a Dyche kind of player. I think he'll be another one. He'll be the next one that the fans turn on. But no, I mean, you look at the team last night. I think the back line with Savonia coming, staying in there. Ando, Morgan Gibbs White picked himself. Be interested to see what he does with Ndoye. I'd like to see him start again, but no, I think you look at it with Sangare. I think the only thing for me is I don't think Luiz will play, and I think it's down to Sangare or Yates that will drop in there.
Outstanding. Alan Merryweather, one of the organisers of the Tricky Tree Travel Club, pub landlord in Alston. Been a pleasure having you with us. I know you got to fly, Alan. Thank you for being with us.
Cheers.
I'll let you out. We'll see you soon, buddy. Take care.
I've loved it. Thanks, guys. Good to see you all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Alan Merryweather, what a legend. Okay, so let's get into a bit more chat about Bournemouth. Richard Spray has stepped in today to give us our Bournemouth opposition. So here it comes on screen. Over to you, Richard.
Yep. So in honor of the wonderful Raf, honor who comes on our podcast regularly, as you all know, and does this. Just quickly, looking at the last three fixtures that they've had, as Alan touched on, Crystal Palace, they played Fulham prior to that, and then Leeds prior to that. So they are third in the Premier League right now. They're certainly in form. They've won 4 matches, they've drawn 3, and they've lost only 1. They're not a high possession team, so it's not something where we're going to see them dominate the possession consistently throughout the match, but they do play, a very, consistent and cohesive brand of football. They have, as Alan, he honestly gave a great summary of them. That back line's been a bit challenged with the loss of Huijsen and Zerbani, but they do have some a mainstay in there in Senesi, Argentinian player. So they've scored 14 goals, so they can certainly score goals, but they've let in 11 as well. And I think their XG is actually in the negative, XGA, or expected goals against and expected goals. They're actually in the negative by about, I'm not by a huge margin, by about like 0.4. But that just goes to show they are, they are a team that we can get to if the chances come. We can potentially can do something offensively against them, not just defensively. The thing to know about them, and this shouldn't surprise anyone because of the way that Tyler Adams sets the tone kind of in the midfield area. So just looking at their midfield, when you look at the overall kind of like score for them, they're about 6.82. We're at about a 6.83 on SofaScore. They have a 7, though, in consistent 7 in Senesi. So that's the guy you have to be concerned about. What's interesting about them, though, is that they typically play that 4-2-3-1 formation. They typically you'll see Adams Scott play in that midfield area, and they'll rotate. But their back line is made up of one sort of mainstay in Senesi and another player in Diakite. But both of those guys aren't very tall, right? They're not going to be these players that we've used to see with them that are a bit taller, a little bit more difficult to work through from a crossing standpoint, set piece standpoint. So that's something to be cognizant of. Truffert has been good, but again, he's mostly a forward-thinking player. He's a guy who's going to get up the pitch. So there's going to be opportunity, I think, play behind them. And I think under Dyche now, we're going to see a bit more of a direct form of football and a little bit more, try to get at them on the break. And so when we look at how they give up goals in a second, you'll see why that might be of an advantage to us. Plus Jimenez is another potential weakness for them. He's a 20-year-old guy from AC Milan on loan, so he's getting acclimated to the Premier League. He's likely going to play. He's going to be a player that might be a player that we can take advantage of and exploit, because of course when you've got Callum Hudson-Odoi on that side of the pitch, who's got that savvy, he's got that football IQ, he can probably do something with that. But Scott's their kind of creative force in the middle. But like I said, Adams sets the tone because they're real scrappy. They like to dispossess. They like to get the ball back in the middle and then try to transition quickly. They're going to do a mid to high press. So just be conscious of that. So it may be somewhat challenging to play through the middle a little bit. We've all seen Tyler Adams. He's probably emblematic of I know he's an American player, so I'm probably getting into sacrilege at this point, but gosh, that guy pisses me off. When I watch him play, he's just such a little arrogant, little scrappy guy, and it's just so annoying, But he's the kind of player that if he's on your team, you probably would love to have, because his S-Hauser, he's a bit high, So, but he's gonna, like I said, he's gonna kind of manage that middle. And then Tavernier, who is a player that honestly Dan and I were talking about as players that we might be interested in, because I think he's underrated and he's a bit versatile too. You've seen him play in the 10 against Fulham. You've seen him shift out to the right. But really, in the end, the two players right now that are just driving everything forward, and we can kind of move on to the next slide, Greg, from a Dangerman perspective. Semenyo has been absolutely incredible this season. He's got 6 goals and 3 assists. He's got a conversion rate that's kind of somewhat equitable to Chris Wood. He's just been brilliant. And you can see from the heat map here, those who can't see, that the heat map is basically showing the guy goes everywhere. So what he's going to do is rotate around and move around and try to find ways to exploit space, take on a certain, get a sort of matchup in his favor. And so that's something that we have to be thinking about. How are we going to impact that? I don't know what will happen with Zinchenko. I know he's he looked like he went off injured, obviously, so he may not feature in this match. And so having Savona get a few more minutes and maybe looking a little bit more confident is a good thing. But going up against Savona in one of your first, one of the first times you potentially could be starting in the Premier League, it's not going to be an easy task for him. And I think Nico's going to have to be the guy. I don't know how you deal with that in terms of managing that rotation. But then you've got a new player that's come in Eli Junior Krupi, who's a French player who's been brilliant, 19 years old. He's got 3 goals. His conversion rate is at 60% right now. And so he's not a big guy. He's kind of slight. He's quicker. He's not the same kind of player as Evan Nielsen, so maybe they're going to deploy Evan Nielsen in that striker position because he has a little bit more physicality to him. But the way that that Krupi is playing right now, it's going to be hard for them to take him off the pitch. But that'll work to our advantage in the sense that I think a player like Murillo and a player like Milenkovic, clearly with their kind of physical presence, can deal with him. And and Murillo's quick, right? And he's agile, he's quick, so he can probably manage that a little bit better. But it is going to be important, the way Semenyo is playing, the way Tavernier is playing, that you do potentially add some cover by having Murillo and Milenkovic rotating. And if you look at the last match that we just played, obviously against Porto, they were playing at a consistently deeper position throughout the match. So different than what we saw under Ange, of course, by not playing as high of a line. So that'll work to our advantage. But from a goal standpoint, they're susceptible to open play goals. They've given up a couple of set pieces. They've given up a counter attack goal, but in reality, the way that you're going to work through them is really attacking the edges, because their fullbacks just aren't as good at defending as I think what they've had in the past. Clearly, Kirkes was really good at doing both. Plus that middle of the park, I think we're going to get opportunities on crosses and set pieces, and as well as in terms of taking advantage of the lack of height. Senesi's he's got a good aerial dual win rate, so you got to be cognizant of that. But I think as a general whole, we might have the advantage there. So definitely an opportunity, I think, to beat them. If there's ever going to be a season where we can do it, this seems like it's the one. And as I told you, if we can beat Bournemouth and end up 14th in the league and go deep in Europa, I would be the happiest man on the planet. Because winning an away match against Bournemouth, who's been a bogey team, it's just, I don't know what it is about them. They just drive me crazy. But I definitely think this is the time. This is the time where we can get at them.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that, Richard. It's interesting how expectations change and outcomes in your head might change off the back of a win and the feel-good factor. I think what we need to do is make sure that we look at the next batch of games and then kind of readdress what we might be happy with at the end of the season. I mean, a week ago, I was happy with 17th and no Europa trophy. This is the guy that said, let's finish 17th and win the Europa, because obviously our Premier League status has been endangered, Danscape. And now it feels like, we've got ourselves back on that even keel, still a load of work to do. The Europa League, looks better than it did because we've got a win in that competition, but we now need a win in the Premier League, Danscape, don't we? Can we go to Bournemouth? Can we get a win? What have you found out about them? Let's hear your thoughts. Let's get that music lined up. Here we go.
I'm a stat man.
Just realised, Richard, you're going to have to get your video editing skills in place because you've still got Nuno's picture on there, and we didn't even have time to put Ange in. So at least we can try and we'll work it. We'll take Nuno out and we'll get Dych'e in. That's good.
You can't keep up with that.
Can't keep up,
I guess the question is, can we go there and win it? I mean, absolutely we can. And I think it's always going to be a case of going there and playing exactly how we expect that Dyche will want us to play. I think a bit of a smash and grab, a bit of managing the game and having to make life difficult for them. So, look, they have had a brilliant start to the season. In terms of like an overall performance rating, like 81%, that's they are where they sort of deserve to be for their performance overall, being fourth in the league at the minute compared to what we've delivered in the league so far. I guess what stands out is that they are doing what we did last season, right? They have very much scored highest on that kind of smash and grab rating. Right? They are taking their chances. I'll come on to it in a bit, but I think they are like 6 goals ahead of their expected goals scored, right? And most of that is Semenyo. So whilst they've been good, they still sort of rely on the fact that they are in that momentum of just being able to take the chances and get the game seen out. So that's one thing that stands out. And obviously the S-housery, right? So they're doing what we did last season as well in terms of frustrating teams. And they've always been like this under Iraola, right? They always commit a lot of fouls and pick up quite a lot of yellow cards and stuff. They stop teams getting behind them. They will resort to just stopping you however they can. And they've had a good goalkeeping performance, which again points to the fact that it's a bit of a, similar to us last season. The difference with what they do is that they do press on and they do try and take the game to the opposition in a way that last season we kind of let teams come at us. So I think just quickly, I haven't had a chance to actually review this morning, but they are 6 points better off than they were last season against the same teams, right? So they are doing that, but you can see the one that did stand out when I looked at it is the goals minus XG on the left there, sort of halfway down. I think 7. Look, they're plus 7 goals. Better off in these games in terms of against their XG. So they're outperforming them by 4. But overall, they've kind of turned their season around from last time to take 7 more goals from the chances they've created. So that's where they are. That's what their strength has been. The rest of it actually fairly similar in terms of style of what they've done. It's ultimately what football often comes down to, isn't it? As we've experienced the wrong end of lately, is you can do all the right things, but you have got to take those chances, and they're doing that at the moment. One thing that stood out to me, though, is their home versus away record is actually quite different, right? So it's not that many games, I suppose, this season. But on the left, what you've got is the XG, so your attacking creativity. And what I've done is your home form goes along the right, left to right, and your away form goes bottom to top, right? And away from home, they are in the kind of top 25% for chance creation. But at home, they're in the bottom, 10% on there, right? So they are a team that suits going away to someone who's going to perhaps step onto them and counterattack them again, like we kind of were last season. And that's what stood out to me, is that actually at home they've struggled to create the chances that they need to I suppose deserve the results. I've not looked at their results at home. They might have picked up the points, but that's something that stood out. Whereas for us, it's kind of the other way around, right? Away from home, we've created very little, but we have had some tough games away from home. It's at home that we've created more. And then on the right is the opposite end of it. So the expected goals against. And on that one, they've actually been really solid at home defensively. They're almost at 100%, right? A brilliant defense at home. But away from home, they've been in the bottom 10% defensively. So they're actually a bit of a topsy-turvy team in terms of how they go about, attacking and defending. And that suggests that you might end up with a boring 0-0, I guess, because at home they'll be really good defensively and they don't create a lot. And I think we'll probably be the same, I would say, given there's not much time to prep this game. I think we'll just be looking at trying to be as solid as we can. And I did have one more just on the players. And obviously Semenyo is the standout player, but none of their other attackers are standing out at the minute as much as he is, right? He's 9 goals and assists. He's involved in 38 of their goal and shot creation moments. So it is almost like if you stop Semenyo, you stop Bournemouth potentially from an attacking threat. I know they've got Clivert, who had a good season last season, but he's not standing out in these numbers defensively. That some of their players do stand out a bit more. Senesi's been really good as that kind of Murillo-esque quarterback for him. So there's ways to go about getting a result, that's for sure. And I'm sure it's the kind of game Dyche will be relishing to show that the fashionista of Iraola is just kind of doing what he's always done, really.
Dyche strikes me as a manager that he's got a lot of old school qualities about him. Does things in a very old school sense, and the things I hear people say is, the modern player won't accept that, or the millennials aren't going to accept that. And I just think football, to a certain degree, is football. And he talked about skinny jeans, flared jeans, all that kind of stuff, and things come in fashion, go out of fashion. The long throw-ins, the vogue of set pieces, and so on. So he's very precise in making sure that he doesn't pigeonhole himself into any particular style. He says he's been put in more boxes in his career than he can remember, and has never tried to battle his way out of a box. He's just let people make their own minds up. So in terms of this game, the way I see it, he's going to look at the opposition and what they can pose in terms of a threat. But I also believe that he's more about the squad of players that he's got. And I think you're right, Dan, and Alan said as well, when you mentioned that Douglas Luiz, it feels like he'll come out of this lineup. So I'm going to put the FOTMob up on the screen for everyone. And I'm going to lead the first sort of look at a team on this time, and then I'll come to you guys. I've got the team from last night on the FOTMob, which for everyone who don't remember, it was Zinchenko, Williams, Morello, Milenkovic, Luiz and Anderson in the midfield, Hudson-Odoi on the left, Dan on the right, Gibbs White in the 10, Igor Jesus up top. My view is that Douglas Luiz does step out, and I think this is a game for Ryan Yates. It could be Dominguez, it could be Sangare, but it just feels to me like the club captain. Everyone said that he will benefit from the Sean Dych'e appointment, perhaps more than others. I'm not ready to say he's going to start a load of games, but an away trip to Bournemouth and the way that I expect Dyche to set them up and how they will sit in perhaps a bit more and need the midfield battles to be won, then I think this is perfect for Ryan Yates. I see Elliot Anderson keeping his spot. I think that, he's so important to us. I think Gibbs White keeps his spot. I think Igor Jesus keeps his spot. I thought he was excellent last night. And again, Chris Wood might come back into the thinking because he might be recovered. But I think it would be intelligent work from the manager, shall we say, to give Igor that run now. He's got his goal from the penalty spot last night. I don't see a need to change it. Again, Callum stays in place. Doi stays in place. I don't see too much of a reason to change what we saw last night. Zinchenko is the obvious one that comes out. And I now think that we see Savona come into play and he'll start a game and Williams will go to left back. So we'll finish the game at the back. I beg your pardon. We'll start the game on Sunday how we finished it last night with Williams and Savona in the fullback areas. There is a case to be made for Jair Cunha at right back potentially. He couldn't feature last night. Does Sean Dyche, now that he's got him at his disposal, does he think that Jair Cunha is a better option? Again, I don't know. But this is my team and what I would pick. And I think Savona did really well last night. And, a back line that is more of a mid to low block, or maybe even the lowest kind of block on the edge of your penalty area where Milenkovic is happiest and Murillo's happiest. Savona will definitely be happy there. So I'm expecting, a solid back line, whoever turns out, but I would go with Savona. And that's pretty much how I see it. I don't see the need for major changes. As much as he's got a squad of players in front of him that he can choose from, options from the bench will include Wood if he's back, will include a Dominguez and a Sangare. So you can mix the midfield up. I think Dominguez is definitely a Sean Dyche type player. So I'm expecting minutes for him coming forwards. But I'll say it again. Williams, Savona, Murillo, Milenkovic in the back line, Yates and Anderson in the engine room, Hudson-Odoi and Doi, Gibbs White in the three behind an Igor Jesus. Richard Spray, over to you.
Yeah, I was thinking you're right. It's the same personnel grouping and the same formation that you put up there. I think what I worry about is going against Semenyo. If there's ever a match where you wish you had Ola Aina back, I mean, you wish you had him back anyway because he's a really good player, and what he brings in terms of the intangibles. But I think he can deal with a Semenyo. He's the kind of player with the same elite traits to kind of match that up. I worry about that with Savona, which means you're going to have to either bring in Doi down to support that defensive play, because you just cannot allow him to dictate things, as Dan said. Once you control that aspect of Bournemouth, you eliminate their key threat throughout the match. So he's just he's a physical player. He's quick. He can shoot the ball from outside the box. I mean, he's good on the dribble. So there's just so much that you have to deal with when it comes up to Antoine Semenyo. So can Savona do that? I mean, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But I do believe it looks like Zinchenko's probably not going to play, I would imagine. I haven't looked at what his injury status is.
His groin
he looked like he was done after last night. So you kind of anticipated this being the matchup. It's unfortunate that Savona doesn't play left back, because I think moving Nico over to that side would be better in order to allow for us to control some of that. But again, like I said, he's going to rotate around. It'd be difficult for Nico to play as forward as he wants to play, as well as trying to rotate into spaces wherever Semenyo lands. That's going to be difficult for him to keep doing that.
So Richard, if you think that Semenyo up against Savonia is a danger point for us, and you'd rather have Williams at right back, let's move them over. And let's say Dyche agrees with you, he's got to put Williams at right back because of Semenyo. Savonia won't play left back. Who would play left back?
That's my point. I don't know how you manage that.
There's a Morato, isn't there?
But we've seen that not go well. So I think what I would type of style though. I know, but let's move them back the way that they were. And here's what I suggested earlier, and what I think is going to have to happen. You know, just like in American football, you have a safety and you have a cornerback. Cornerbacks are going to be trying to eliminate the best athletes on the edges and wide receivers, but you're going to have support from those safeties coming over to try to eliminate them, you know, getting behind the player, being able to play through them. So my assessment would be you've got to be one of Murillo if Semenyo deploys to the right, our left. You might have Murillo rotating to try to help provide some cover there. Similarly, Milenkovic, you can have Ndoye drop back. So it's not ideal, but I think because it will take away from some of our attack with Ndoye if you're trying to do that. But I think that's what's going to have to happen, because you may just be forced down that route by virtue of Zinchenko, you know, not being able to play. And we don't really have a true left back at this stage beyond Williams. So I'm going to keep it as is right now.
So you're happy with that team as it is?
I mean, I just think you have to go that way. Yeah.
Okay. Danscape, anything different from you?
Yeah, probably. I think it's a game where we need Sangare. I suppose your challenges in this, the formation I'm happy with. Your challenge in this is how do you deal with the press of Bournemouth, because they really will press you high, right? So your midfielders need to be able to play out of that and handle that and have the energy for that, I guess. And that's my only concern with Yatesy going away to their places is in that deeper role that he'll have to do, whether that suits him. So I'm maybe preferring Sangare. However, you have also got to support Savona on that right-hand side, and that support is often from that right-hand side midfielder, right? So it's whether or not what perhaps Nuno would have done here in the past is this is one of those games where he'd have played a Dominguez on the wing.
Dominguez, yeah.
Yeah, and it's whether or not maybe that's it, because yes, you're going to have one-on-ones with Semenyo, but you can also stop the ball actually getting to him in the first place, can't you? So having that extra body to cut off the passes to him and cut off the space is also part of it. So I did wonder whether we might see something like that. Like I say, I think we would have under Nuno, whether that's in the Dyche repertoire, we don't know. And I also wondered whether we might actually see Taiwo play up front, because I thought Jesus put in a real shift, like did really well defensively last night. And I think Taiwo is a Dyche striker. If Wood's out injured, like he's kind of like a better finisher version of Beto, isn't he? That he had at Everton, and I think he can do that role of disrupting them on the break. Yes, it would be better if he was fitter and more match ready, but I just wonder whether we see him.
He had a good 45 against Chelsea. I was very pleased with Taiwo. You know, for 45 minutes.
He looks lean. It's just that sharpness. Yeah. So I wonder whether we see him put in the hard work to get us so far into the game, and then you see Jesus come on and maybe see, you know, if we're chasing the game or if we've got something to try and snatch late on. I mean, look, a point in this game is a good result, right? It's away at Bournemouth. We'd all be well happy with that. So I think we'll set up with that in mind. It's difficult in the fullback options. But I think we've just got to try and cut off the supply to Semenyo as much as anything, because I think, if you leave him one-on-one, he might get some joy, but there's other ways of managing the game out, and hopefully we can, keep that intensity up.
No one would be mentioning Taiwo Awoniyi if he hadn't been a surprise appearance last week. And I wonder if Ange's parting gift from us, his legacy, is the rebirth of Taiwo Awoniyi, because Taiwo Awoniyi would not be in anyone's team, anyone's thought process. He was the forgotten man. But when he's thrust into the game to start against Chelsea and does himself credit, I'm not saying he set the world on fire, but all of a sudden it was like, okay, Taiwo's still there. Okay, he's an option. You know, if Wood's injured, I know we've got Callum Mwendo, but if we want that battering ram and that type player that you touched on as Dyche would like, then all of a sudden Has Ange Postecoglou left us a parting gift and says, "Don't forget, guys, you still got that tour where I won you up top." So we'll have to wait and see. We might see him feature. We might see him on the bench. Maybe if Wood's injured, this is more of a game because Taiwo isn't in the Europa squad either, so he couldn't have featured last night on the bench. So yeah, the idea of Taiwo is not a crazy one. We'll have to wait and see on that. Wei in FFC said Taiwo was loving Dyche's first training session, judging by what he saw. Okay. We've gone over time as usual, so we'll round things off there. We've had a good chat about Porto last night. It was exciting, getting a win. You know, you just want to see your team win. I enjoyed last night. I enjoyed watching us play last night, you know, and I enjoyed watching us play under Nuno Espirito Santo because we were winning. that takes the edge off. And also as well, when you have moments in games that are really exciting, such as the Elanga breakaway goal against Man United. You know, that's what football's all about. It's about really strong moments. And maybe having a load of possession and passing the ball around for 70% of the game is fine in some teams' eyes, but I just kind of find that boring if there's no end product and you're not doing anything with it. So the Dyche era is underway. We've got a win under our belts, but we focus on Sunday at Bournemouth. And so, Danscape, I come back to you to ask you for your final thoughts ahead of the game on Sunday and your score prediction.
My score prediction is 0-0. I'm going back to that. I don't think I've predicted one of those for a long time. Who would under Ange, right? So I think I'm going to just say 0-0. Last season, whenever I predicted 0-0, it wasn't, and we tended to win. So I'm hoping that's a good luck sign. I think it is going to be. It could be quite a grim game. I think we'll try and stop them playing, and that's a sensible thing to do right now. We need momentum in the league. My target for Dyche between now and the end of the season is basically, you know, he needs to win us 40 points, something like that. 42 points now is the target, right? That's the level we should be performing at in terms of the squad and the investment we've made between now and the end of the season. And that takes us to, I don't know, 12th, 13th in the league. The difference between that and top half is the Ange mistake, isn't it? That's the problem. That's the difference now. So it's about getting back on track with that. And we've got some tough games, but that's the Premier League. We did that last season, so let's start again.
Yeah, just before bringing Richard, I think you're right on the Ange mistake, because I think if Dyche had come in after Nuno, I think it'd have. I'm going to say I think it'd have beaten Sunderland. I think it'd have beaten Burnley, and you know, we'd have lost to Arsenal probably, and the Chelsea game you never know about. But you know, we'll never know. Richard Spray, last thoughts and score prediction, please.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go for we'll go and do a Bournemouth, I guess, on them, which is a smash and grab scenario like Dan just mentioned. And I want to say we win 1-0. I predicted 1-0 against Porto, and we won 2-0. So I'm gonna go with that again, just by virtue of the luck, obviously, clearly that brings. No, I just think what we do well, I think works against what they do well, and you hope that we're able to manage the Semenyo scenario. As Dan pointed out, it's a great point about as much as we don't love putting Dominguez in certain areas other than midfield, putting him up there would be a great idea. So I'm hoping for a 1-0 victory. I think we can achieve that. It would be absolutely beautifully poetic if for some reason Taiwo did start, that he's the one who scores the goal, because he hasn't scored many of them in a while. But that would be perfect. That would be poetic for us to finally beat Bournemouth, and the most unexpected person to do so is Taiwo Awoniyi, and so that would be fantastic. So I'm praying for that outcome. I'm praying for us to beat them anyway, because it's just I just cannot deal with them. So yeah, 1-0.
Viewers and listeners might remember me saying that I was at Nuno's last game. That was my first game of the season. We lost 3-0. It was the end of the Nuno era, and it was my first game. And then my next game, the only other game I've been to, was the Midtjylland game under Ange. So 2 games, 2 managers. And some might say that signaled the end of the Ange era, because that was a disaster. So I'm going on Sunday. And this, I think, is the birth of the Sean Dyche era. So I am now saying, here we go, here it comes.
Yeah, what bribe do we need to give you to avoid that?
Well, I've got my 3rd game of the season, my 3rd manager of the season. And I've got my boy with me. Orlando will be with me. So we're excited. And you know what, as well, he's been coming with me now since we've been back in the Premier League. So the games I've been able to get to, and he's only ever seen Forest win against Chelsea a couple of years ago. So it's long overdue that we get a win at Bournemouth. The Dyche effect is in full swing. I'm going to say 2-1. Okay, that's where I'm at. I'm not going to name any scorers. Well, go on, and I'll name Gibbs White. I think he's back, and I think he's going to start getting the rub of the green. I think when you're back, sometimes you're back properly. He can breathe again. We can all breathe again. Take a deep, deep breath, guys, because the season is up and running. First win under Dyche's belt. Let's see what Sunday brings. See you soon.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Dark and Red.